Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Madheka Bandho Masangin Madguru Man Mahadana Man Nistarakamat Bhagya Madananda Namostute. Hari Om Tat Sat. So Parksha Maharaj has asked a question regarding the apparent partiality of the Lord, and Shukadeva Goswami begins to answer the question. He begins his answer by saying that the question was very good. Sadhu Prishna. That's a super excellent question. It is based on deep deliberation. Still, Harish Taritam Adbhutam. The character or exploits of Hari are Adbhutam, means wonderful or astonishing. The import is that there's no antecedent for them, and therefore there's no way to actually deliberate upon them. Antecedent meaning like, you can give some previous example of something that was like the activities of Bhagavan. But there is no one in Prakriti that is like Bhagavan. And therefore, there's no example that you can draw from in order to compare it to the acts of Bhagavan. In other words, his acts cannot truly be deliberated upon. The truth of them can only be revealed by himself or by sacred texts. And therefore, although your question is excellent based on deep deliberation, it doesn't matter how deep you deliberate on in reality, like the absolute truth. It cannot be understood except for by revelation. So having said that, he begins his answer by saying that the Supreme Lord is beyond nature, and therefore beyond the gunas, and therefore there can be no question of him being partial, because partiality is informed by the gunas of Prakriti. And since he's beyond Prakriti and Nirguna, there's no question of him being partial in the way that it is normally seen in the material world. And yet his Leela does look like he shows partiality towards the Devas and against the Asuras. So his answer to that, as we discussed yesterday, is that in fact, he is not being partial. He, supported by his own internal energy, which is known as Vishuddha Sattva. They have different names, of course, but the main term that will be used in this section is Vishuddha Sattva, or Shuddha Sattva. It means pure goodness. And pure goodness is ontologically different from the mode of goodness of the material world, or to speak of the mode of passion and ignorance. So taking support of Vishuddha Sattva, he enters inside the Prakriti, Swamaya Guna, means taking shelter of the quality of Vishuddha Sattva. He enters by his own Maya into the material world. And with that Vishuddha Sattva energy, that spiritual energy, he empowers both the Devatas and the Asuras. They are both empowered by that potency of Vishuddha Sattva in order to assist or oppose in the Leela. Otherwise, the Devatas cannot assist God, nor can the Asuras oppose God. There's no question. With the mere movement of his eyebrow, everyone can be finished. There's no question of them assisting or opposing the Lord. And therefore, in order for them to participate in the Leela, they need the empowerment of his own Shakti, Vishuddha Sattva. I always did find it strange growing up in the sort of Middle Eastern traditions, how there was like a God and the devil, and the whole presentation was like the devil could somehow oppose God. And I was always wondering, how does that work though? Like as a child, I was just like, how does that work? I mean, he's coming from God like the rest of us, and God is all powerful. Like, how does that work that he can oppose him? So now we're getting an explanation from Srimad Bhagavatam. There is a devil that can oppose God. That means the devil must be empowered by God's own Shakti in order to perform the work of opposing him. And the Devatas, similarly, the angels, they're also endowed with God's own potency in order to assist him. So someone may ask the question, that why is it saying in Bhagavan's Leela though that he always takes the side of the Devas and never takes the side of the Asuras? If he is impartially empowering everyone with his Shakti, then why is it sometimes it is not saying that he's on the side of the Asuras? Why always consistently he's on the side of the Devatas? So then the answer to that is that the whole purpose of the Leela is to give pleasure to his bhaktas. So I gave the example yesterday. I think it is a good example. But I gave the example that if you are a track and field aficionado, how do you say that word anyway? Wow. Sometimes the ghetto just doesn't leave no matter how hard you try. Anyway, suppose you're into the track and field. And so you're watching track and field for getting pleasure. And Usain Bolt, I gave the example of Usain Bolt. So he is Bhagavan in our example. So Usain Bolt is so much faster than everyone that if he just wins the race 5 seconds ahead of everyone, it would become very boring for someone who is a track and field, guy. So suppose Usain Bolt, he wants to give pleasure to those who have come to the meet to see him. In order to give pleasure to them, and he knows he can defeat everyone by 5 to 7 seconds. So that will not be very nice for the people who have come to see the race. So by his own power, if he had it, then he empowers all the other opponents in the race so that they can compete with him, so that it looks like it's a very meaningful race. So in that way, the people who are seeing the race are very invested in it. It becomes very relishable for them to see that. So we have to keep in mind that all the Leelas of Bhagavan are for the pleasure of his devotees. So taking that into regard, coming back to the question, why is it not seen that sometimes he's on the side of the Asuras? Why is he consistently on the side of the Devatas against the Asuras? So for the Leela, in order to, Leela means play, basically, like a dramatic play. So if you're getting some actors for the play, you have to find the right person who can play the role, isn't it? Suppose you're doing some Mahabharata play, and you're looking for some character to play Bhima. So Bhima is a huge guy, he's strong as 10,000 elephants. If you get some bony fellow like me to play Bhima role, it will not fit the role. It will not be a proper fit. You want me to be a part of the play, I have to play some Brahmana in the play. I cannot play Bhima. The appropriate person has to be selected for the role in order for the play to come out nicely. So in the Leela of the Lord, the people are empowered according to their appropriate position. The Devatas, they already have inclination towards Bhagavan. They are devotees, they are mixed devotees, but they already have inclination for Bhagavan. So it only makes sense in the play that Bhagavan is assisted by the Devatas. If Bhagavan is assisted by the Asuras, that would not make any sense because the Asuras have no natural inclination towards Bhagavan. So if you would see such a thing in a play, like there's no consistency there. It doesn't make any sense. So in this way, Bhagavan is empowering the Devas to assist him because they are fit for that particular role. And the Asuras are being empowered by the same Shakti to oppose him. And that is fitting for their position also, how they are in terms of their mentality. In this way, or in any case, both Devatas and Asuras, they have to be empowered by the Shakti in order to participate in the Leela. This is what we heard. And therefore the Lord is impartial because everyone is being endowed with that potency by which they can participate in the play. So this protects his impartiality. This is basically the idea here. So in the next verse 7, I'm flying out to Nashville in a couple of hours, so I have to do my class. I'm only going to do one verse today because I don't have time. So the next verse, Jiva Goswami says there are 3 questions that come up. He presents 3 questions as objections to what we have just heard in verse number 6. Objection number 1, not really objection, but why is this Vishuddha Sattva not just material Sattva? You're saying that Bhagavan is empowering with this special Sattva called Vishuddha. But why is this Vishuddha Sattva not just material Sattva? Now, first question. Question number 2, when and where does he empower the Devatas and Asuras with this Shakti? That is the second question. And third question is, he says, if they're getting the empowerment by this Shakti, Vishuddha Sattva, how does this not incur the fault of disabling the results of acts performed and enabling the results of acts not performed? In other words, in the world of karma, you get the merit of the acts that you do, and you don't get the results of the acts that you don't perform. But if the Vishuddha Sattva is empowering everyone, the thinking of the objector, the Purvapakshan, is that how does this not incur the fault of disabling the results of acts performed and enabling the acts of results that weren't performed? So Jiva Goswami informs us that this next verse is supposed to be an answer to that question. So we'll look at this verse briefly. Here's the verse 7. Sattvam rajastama iti pakrite natmano guna natesham yugapadarajan parasa ulasa evava. So my dear King Parikshit, the material qualities, Sattva Guna, Rajaguna, and Tamaguna, all belong to the material world and do not even touch the supreme personality of Godhead. So Sattvam Rajas Tamaiti, the gunas of Pakriti, Pakriti, so these are the Pakriti Guna, they are the gunas of Pakriti, not Atmanaha, and they are not found in the self. They are not found in Bhagavan. This is supposed to be an answer to the first question. Why is this Vishuddha Sattva, not Sattva Guna? You understand? Because the word Sattva is used for both of them. For the spiritual energy, the word Sattva is used. And for the material energy, the word Sattva is also used. So why are you saying that this Sattva is not material Sattva? Sometimes devotees even think that Sattva Guna, Vishuddha Sattva or pure Sattva, is Sattva Guna devoid of Rajas and Tamas. It is Sattva Guna minus Rajas and Tamas, but that is not possible. All the gunas of Prakriti, they are always together. So Sattva Guna, Rajaguna, Tamaguna, they are always together. You cannot have one without the other. When we say, sometimes we say in the material world that someone is in Sattva Guna, that just means that Rajaguna and Tamaguna is very much less, and the person is dominated by Sattva Guna, but Rajas and Tamas is certainly there. And we say someone is in Rajaguna, that just means Sattva and Tamas is very less, but it is there. So these three gunas, they are always together. Vishuddha Sattva, pure Sattva, is not Sattva Guna minus Rajas and Tamas. It is an ontologically different energy. So this first part of the verse is giving the answer to the objection. Why is this Sattva Guna that you call Vishuddha not the Sattva Guna of Prakriti? So Shukadeva Goswami says, Sattva Rajas Tamaiti. So the three gunas of Prakriti, Prakriti Guna, they are the gunas of Prakriti, and not Atmana, they are not found in the self. So not Atmanaha, Atmanaha means Bhagavan. The self here means God. They are not found in God. So we've given this example many times to explain the three gunas are the constituents of the Maya Shakti, or the potency of Maya, the potency that deludes the jivas. And this Maya Shakti is compared to a reflection of sunlight in darkness. So this analogy is meant to explain the relationship of the Maya Shakti with Bhagavan. A Maya Shakti is compared to a reflection of sunlight in darkness. So four points we get from this analogy. Point number one, the reflection of sunlight depends on the sun, right? A reflection of sunlight is coming from the sun only, so it is sheltered in the sun. At the same time, the reflection of sunlight does not exist in the sun. That's point number two. Point number three, the reflection of sunlight exists outside of the sun. And point number four, the reflection of sunlight is seen when one is not looking at the direct sun. Four points. So point number one, the reflection of sunlight comes from the sun or is sheltered in the sun. Point number two, it does not exist inside the sun. Point number three, it exists outside the sun. Point number four, the reflection of sunlight is seen when the sun is not seen. 4 points. So this is also a description of the relationship of Maya Shakti to Bhagavan. So Maya Shakti is sheltered in Bhagavan, which means it cannot exist unless supported by God. But it does not exist inside the Swarup or inside God's own form. That's point number two. Point number three, it exists outside of God's form. Point number four, Maya is seen when Bhagavan is not seen, right? Just like now, none of us see Bhagavan. So what are we seeing? We see Maya. We see our bodies, we see our minds, for starters, and then we see the so-called objective world, and we are preoccupied in that. So when Bhagavan is seen, then Maya is not seen. And when Maya is seen, that means Bhagavan is not seen. isn't it? So this we can understand by practical experience. We're experiencing Maya because we are not experiencing Bhagavan. So this is the meaning of this first statement here. Sattva rajas tamariti pakrite natmano guna. Sattva rajas tama, they are pakrita guna. They are the gunas of pakriti. Now atmanaha, they are not found in Bhagavan. So this is answering the question why the sattva that relates to Bhagavan is not the sattva of pakriti. Because the sattva of pakriti is not found in Bhagavan. Because this verse is saying the gunas of pakriti are not found in Bhagavan. So therefore, this sattva that we're talking about that empowers both the devatas and the asuras, that sattva must be a categorically different sattva. That sattva is called as Vishuddha sattva or Shuddha sattva. It is not the sattva of pakriti. Because the sattva of pakriti exists outside Bhagavan. It doesn't exist inside Bhagavan. And that sattva is perceived when Bhagavan is not perceived. So that is answering that first question that Jiva Goswami introduces the verse with. Okay, if we accept that sattva rajas tamariti pakriti natmanandana. So then it says natesham yugapa rajam rasa ulasa evava. So let's read the second part. These three gunas cannot act by increasing or decreasing simultaneously. So natesham yugapa rasa ulasa evava. So tesham means of them, the gunas of pakriti, they do not simultaneously increase or decrease. Not hrasa ulasa evava. So the meaning is this: if you go to Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled the Tri Gunamaya Yoga, the yoga that deals with the three gunas, chapter 14, Bhagavad Gita. So there, Krishna has described that the gunas are always vying for supremacy. Sometimes sattva is victorious over rajas and tamas. Sometimes rajas is victorious over sattva and tamas. Sometimes tamas is victorious over sattva and rajas, right? So the gunas do not simultaneously increase or decrease. One guna suppresses the other guna in order for it to have exaltation. In order for one guna to become exalted, another guna has to become suppressed. So that is why you see, for example, you'll wake up one morning and you feel like you're just really active, like I want to do something. Now, Raja guna is suppressing sattva and rajas. Sometimes you wake up and you're just like, no, I'm not getting up. Thomas is winning the day that morning. Sometimes you wake up and you're like, let's do bhajan. You feel peaceful, you feel regenerated. And you feel like, now let me sit down nicely and enjoy nature and meditate. Those sattva is winning the day. So you don't see that these three gunas are increased simultaneously at the same time. When one guna is exalted, another guna has to be suppressed. That's how that works in the material world. So Krishna describes this in Gita 14:10, that one guna is exalted by suppressing the other two gunas. Now, which guna becomes exalted or suppressed is according to your prarabdha karma. That is how it works. So according to the karmas of the jivas, suddenly they'll get really moved by one force of nature, like sattva, and then another force of nature, like rajas. So according to the prarabdha karma of the jivas, a particular guna of nature becomes prominent in their psyche and becomes prominent in their particular life. That is according to karma. So when one guna is exalted, that is due to the karma of the jiva, and when another guna is suppressed, that is also due to the karmas of the jiva. That is described there, 14:10 Bhagavad Gita. So here it is said, Natesham Yugapa Raja Rasa Ulasa Evava. Of these gunas, it is not saying that there is simultaneous increase and decrease. In other words, it is not saying that all the gunas become exalted at the same time and all the gunas become suppressed at the same time. One guna is exalted by suppressing the others. But when Krishna empowers the gunas of nature with his own Shakti, it is saying that they all achieve ulasa. Ulasa means like excitation or exaltation at the same time. Because Krishna empowered the devas to do their function in his lila, simultaneously he's empowering the asuras to do their function in the lila. Of course, the devas' function is to assist the Lord, and the asuras' function is to oppose the Lord. but both of them are being empowered by that energy simultaneously. That means there's simultaneous ulasa of all the gunas by the Vishuddha Sattva energy. So that is not saying when the gunas are acting according to their own proper nature, that is not possible. One guna is exalted by suppressing the others. So if all the gunas are exalted simultaneously, there must be some energy inside that is making it simultaneously rise like that. Otherwise, it is not possible for the gunas to have simultaneous excitation like that. That is basically the implied meaning here, at least according to Jiva Goswami. Natesham Yugaparajan, Hasa Ulasa Evava. That is not seeing. It is only, so this is giving the answer to the question that the question or the objection was, isn't there a fault of giving the result of an action that wasn't performed, or the fault of disabling the result of an action that was performed? And here, the way this is being answered by this statement, or the answer that is being implied, is that the exaltation of all the gunas simultaneously is not due to the performance of any karma. Try to keep in mind that the excitation or suppression of a guna is due to karma, generally, when not supported by the Shakti of the Lord. But in the case of the simultaneous excitation of all the gunas, it is not due to what someone has performed or not performed. That is due to the Lord's grace empowering them with that Shakti in order to allow them to participate in the Leela. So it has nothing to do with karma. That's the point that's being made here. The objector is saying, isn't some fault incurred that someone is getting a result of something they didn't perform, or not getting the result of something they did perform? Well, that would be true if it was according to karma, but the endowment of the spiritual energy has nothing to do with karma. In other words, it's not because some karmic act was done by the devatas that they got empowerment, and some vicious act was done by the demons by which they got the empowerment. No, being endowed with that Shakti has nothing to do with their karma. So this objection does not apply in this particular case, because being endowed with the Shakti has something to do with their karma. So in this way, these questions, there was a third question also. The third question was, when and where is this Shakti coming? When and where does the Shakti, come in? The Leela, answer was not given directly from the verse, but from the commentaries. It means according to the needs of the Leela. According to the need of the Leela, then you'll get excitation or empowerment from the Shakti. And if not required, then all right, sit down, sit in the back now. Now it's not required for the Leela. So in this way, these three questions are apparently indicated, and they are answered by this particular verse. So the Lord is not intervening. Intervening means that if he was not to empower the gunas with his Shakti, and he were simply to come in and start doing things, then that would disrupt the natural flow of the Mayic energy. And that means people will be getting results. For example, the demons would just be getting chastised for something that they didn't even do. And the devatas will be getting benefited for something that they didn't even do. So that would be unfair then. That would be partial. But here, it is the Shakti that is empowering everyone simultaneously. Everyone's getting exalted. Everyone's being allowed to participate in the Leela according to their own position in the play, so to speak. And therefore, this doubt about this doubt about the karmic point doesn't even come up in this context, because it has, the world of spirit has nothing to do with the world of karma and actions performed on the material platform. So more to this coming up, but we're going to have to pause there because, I have to leave. I have to leave no later than 9:30, but I should probably leave soon for my airport. So let's see if anyone wants to ask anything about what's going on here. Someone sending private message. I wonder what guna inspired you to wear that shirt. See the disrespect of the teacher. That is the spirit of these classes. Everyone disrespects me in public. I'm going to Nashville. It's very hot. So when I travel, I usually wear like these onesies And so I only have two of them. And the black one I have is very hot. It's more like fall level. So I got this one at a thrift store for $12 on my birthday. And it's like thin cotton. And so that is why I selected it. So that is the answer to that particular question. All right, Harisham says, is the doubt that God's partiality is being expressed through manipulation of the gunas? Is the doubt that God's partiality is being expressed through manipulation of the gunas? And his impartiality is being expressed by him transgressing the general laws of karma. You're not your t-shirt. So his impartiality is being expressed by him. His impartiality is being expressed because everyone is being empowered by the same energy. So that is the answer to that particular question. If he was partial, then that means he will empower the devas with the Shakti, but the asuras were not getting any empowerment with the Shakti. That would be partiality. But here it is saying the devatas and the asuras both are being empowered by the same spiritual energy, Vishuddha Sattva. So that is his impartiality. That is how that particular question is answered. And the doubt that God's partiality is being expressed through manipulation of the gunas, that's not the particular doubt. The first doubt was that is the sattva that you're talking about, the sattva of material prakriti. So, and then the second doubt, or the third one, is that I think you're asking about the third doubt, about someone enabling the results of acts not performed or disabling the results of acts that were performed. So honestly, this particular doubt, Purva Paksha, I wasn't 100% clear. I even heard a couple of lectures and it still didn't. And someone even asked about it, but it wasn't super duper clear to me what type of doubt is coming. I think the basic idea here is that if the devatas, they haven't done anything to merit God's assistance, and the asuras haven't done anything to merit God's opposition. And so if God supports the devatas against the demons, that's unfair because it's not in accordance with what they deserve, according to the law of karma. So there's some conflict there with the law of karma if the Lord assists the devatas against the asuras. I think that is a doubt there. It wasn't 100% clear, but I was sitting with it for a while trying to understand. I almost canceled the class also. Got all of this. It's a little bit too much. I got to sit with this a little bit longer. But I think that is a doubt there. The devatas have not done anything to merit God's support. And the asuras have not done anything to merit God's opposition. And yet God is supporting the devas and opposing the demons. So that's unfair. That's basically the idea there. That's unfair. So here it is saying, no, this God's supporting the devatas and opposing the demons has nothing to do with their karma. It has nothing to do with what they've done to merit God's support or his opposition. So that question doesn't even come out. That's out of the picture. Just throw that out of the picture. This has nothing to do with that. That's a whole nother category of topic. Right now, we're just saying that God's spiritual energy has empowered everybody to participate in the Leela. And according to the role they play in the Leela, they're getting a certain result of that. And it has nothing to do with the realm of karma. So that doubt is not appropriate in this particular context. So that's how I understand that this question is being answered by Shukadeva Goswami. Yes, Harishan.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That really helps. And I guess then this could lead to a further doubt that it was originally karma that assigned some of those living entities as devatas and some of them as demons.
Uh-huh.
To some degree, karma assigns you to a certain bucket, but then God ignores your recent karmic actions to give you some other result that you don't deserve, or to withhold the result that you do deserve, So there is still some partiality because he is still choosing to withhold a certain result or give a certain result, sure, through his own energy, but still to a group of people who are in that group because of their karma.
No, okay, so that's what we tried to answer in the beginning of the class. So the response to that will be that the Lord is assisting the devatas because it allows for the seamless unfolding of the Leela. As I mentioned, if the demons were to be the ones to aid Bhagavan, that would be completely rasabas, because they are already disinclined towards Bhagavan. So if suddenly they get empowered with the energy and they're like, yeah, Bhagavan, let's go, then there will be rasa, bhasa, and lila, and that would not give pleasure to the devotees. The devotees would become utterly baffled. And we have to remember that the unfolding of lila is for the pleasure of the devotees. Just as when Usain Bolt gives his power to the other runners, I'm sticking with that. It's a good, I think it's a good thing. It is for the pleasure of those who have come to see the race. He knows that they will not be happy seeing him win by 7 seconds. It'll be such a boring thing. No one will take any interest. He wants to give them something to talk about, Usain Bolt, that is to say. He wants to give them something to talk about. Oh, it was such a close race. And right at the 100-meter mark, then this happened. And so in order to do that, he's empowered all the runners with some of his Shakti so that they can keep pace with him. And that way it becomes very interesting. So if the whole purpose is to give pleasure to the devotees of the Lord, if suddenly the Asuras become his friends because being empowered by Shakti, that wouldn't work. In the same way, if I was cast as Bhima in the Mahabharata play, that will be completely rasbas. No one will understand. If you are a Mahabharata fan and I come out on stage playing Bhima, you say, wait, stop the play, I'm leaving. This is, what have they done? How they've cast a skinny fellow as Bhima. This is not correct. So therefore, the Lord is not he's not being partial to their karmic situation. Rather, he's like, okay, the devatas, they are already inclined towards Bhagavan. So it is only natural that they will be the ones that will want, it would only play out in a natural way that they would assist me in my Leela. And then Asuras, they are already against Bhagavan. So it is natural that they are empowered to continue their opposition. But neither the devatas or the Asuras could assist him or oppose him in any way if not empowered by his Shakti. So therefore, he's being impartial, and he's just supporting them according to their own position and how it will harmonize with the Leela for the pleasure of his devotees. So I think that's how they're getting around this partiality thing here. Okay, Siddhari says, could you comment on what devatas and asuras do when they're not empowered by the Lord Shakti? They just fight with each other. That is the eternal program of the devas and asuras. That you can see now in politics also. For example, this whole good versus evil thing, well, it never gets old because it's eternal. It never will get old. Movies about good versus evil why it never gets old? Because it is eternal. It is the eternal play of the gunas of nature. Good means sattva guna, evil means rajas tamas. So this is the eternal dynamic of nature. And so when Bhagavan is not involved, then what do? They just fight with each other. And sometimes the devatas wins, and sometimes the asuras win. Just as sometimes sattva guna suppresses rajas and tamas, and sometimes rajas and tamas suppresses sattva. So they just fight with each other. That fighting is the reified manifestation of the forces of sattva, rajas, and tamas competing with each other. They're just like reified or concretized forms of the play of nature. So that's all nature is doing, is going like this constantly, nonstop, forever. So then Bhagavan comes in and he's like, hey guys, you want to play with me? They're like, yay. And then he said, okay, but I have to empower you first. Otherwise you can't play with me. You can't just go and play with Bhagavan. That's not possible. You couldn't keep pace. That is like a 2-year-old wanting to run with Usain Bolt. How a 2-year-old will keep pace? It's not possible. So he needs to be uplifted and empowered in order to participate. So there's a very unique explanation of these verses by Jiva Goswami. Okay, so his ultimate interest is the furtherance of the Leela, yes. And he doesn't use the laws of karma to do that, yes, correct. But his own energy, correct. And that's how his seeming partiality is resolved, yes, correct. See, the thing is, and this is why the opening statements of Srimad Goswami are so important. He says, your question was excellent because it was deeply deliberated upon. But Hari's Leela is abhutam. They cannot be deliberated upon. In order to do deliberation, that is the element of prakriti, the buddhi. But Bhagavan's Leela is beyond buddhi. So how you will deliberate upon it? There's no question of deliberation. That point has to be kept in mind in order to appreciate these novel explanations of Jiva Goswami. It has to be something that's not truly, that it has to be some explanation that you would never deliberate upon. some conclusion that you would never come to on your own by just the buddhi element or deliberation upon it. So if you look at the Leela, of course, it looks like God is being partial to the Devas against the Asuras. You would never think, oh, he's empowered everyone with his Shakti in order to participate in his Leela. That you will never think just by the buddhi element. You'll never come to that conclusion. You'll just see, look at this Krishna fellow. He is also just like us. And that is what most of the demonic people think like this. Avajananti mamudha, manusham tanumashrita. Most of them think like this. Just like in India, I hear, in India, people very much like Ekalavya. Ekalavy's story, very famous in Mahabharata. So Ekalavya, he wanted to be a disciple of Dronacharya. But Dronacharya said, no, you can't be my disciple. So Ekalavya, what he did is he made a earthen deity of Dronacharya. And he worshipped that earthen deity of Dronacharya, and he became a very expert, archer. So Dronacharya also trained Arjuna, and he told Arjuna that there is no archer superior to you. My training is such that I admit you are the greatest archer. So one day Arjuna is in the forest, and he sees that some archer has pinned a fly against a tree without killing it with the arrow. How is it possible? Somehow he pierced the wing of the fly and pinned him against the tree without killing the fly. So when Arjuna saw that, he saw this is some very powerful archers there. In fact, he might be better than me. And so he went and found who the archer was, and he saw it was Ekalavya, who was worshiping this earthen deity of Dronacharya. So Arjuna went back and complained on him and criticized Dronacharya. Hey, you only told I would be the greatest archer, that you didn't train anyone else like me. But I see that your own disciple is there. He's worshiping your murti in the forest. He's so expertly pinned one fly against a tree without killing it. You have lied to me. In this way, he made some complaint. So then Dronacharya went to Ekalavya. And when Ekalavya came, he said, oh, Gurudev. Dronacharya had rejected him as disciple. But in this way, he was saying, Gurudev. So Dronacharya said, okay, if I'm your guru, you should give Guru Dakshini. And he says, yes, Guru, whatever you want. So Dronacharya said, give me your thumb from your shooting hand. Give me the thumb only. Now, how you can shoot the arrow without the thumb? So Ekalavya gave the thumb. I mean, he must have been troubled by it, but he gave the thumb only. And then he was not the expert archer anymore. So now in India, if you hear most Indian people tell this story, they say Ekalavya was such a nice disciple. Arjuna was envious. Dronacharya was wrong for asking for such dakshina. They give purport like that because they don't know the Leela. Our acharyas explain it another way. They explain that the reason Arjuna complained on him is because he wanted to protect the posterity, the future, from thinking that you could become expert in bhajan or spirituality without actually going to a guru. If a precedent was set that you didn't need to actually go to the guru and take shelter of him, you can just make some wooden doll and worship that. If that would have become a precedent, then it would destroy the whole relationship of guru and disciple. So Arjuna, as Mahajan, could predict that future, and so he complained on Ekalavya. And some purport is also given there by Dronacharya. They're all great bhaktas of the Lord, but you will not think like that hearing this Leela. You will think it another way. You'll think Ekalavya is such a nice guy. And there's Arjuna is such an envious fellow because he just wanted to be better than everyone. And Dronacharya is out of line for asking something. You would think like that if you hear the story. Even now, you're probably thinking like that. So if you don't hear these explanations, you will not be able to tell what is actually going on. It's all transcendental. So that's why the beginning statement of Shukadeva Goswami is so important for these explanations that we're getting from Jiva Goswami. Otherwise, you'll just, as Prabhupada said in the verse 6, you'll just do aropita. Aropita means superimposition. So you'll impose your own low humanity onto Bhagavan and then come to all the wrong conclusions. So therefore, we have to keep these things in mind. It's a very subtle section, actually. 16th chapter Bhagavad Gita, I don't know what that means. One funny aside, once on book distribution, I handed some guy a Gita. He randomly opened to chapter 16, read the title, immediately said, no thanks, and handed the book back. What is the problem? Divine and demonic, for the chapter 16 is entitled the divine and demonic nature. I think now in 2022, no one will be put off by that. Now they openly say, even the secular world openly talks about politicians and so on as demons. So now they would say, oh yeah, this sounds very interesting. But in the early 2000s, it's a little different story.
I've got the opposite story. I was at MSU one time doing books, and I got down and asked this guy, what's his name? He said, my name is Demon. I'm not sure how he said it. I said, hey, we have a chapter on your name. And I showed him the chapter, and he said, oh, wow, it's pretty good. I'll take it.
So then you're such a clever person.
Now, I was thinking, a little mundane analogy here. We in the academic world, we hear that there's like two groups of people. Some people say that if you give technology to people, it helps alleviate poverty, it helps this and that. But there's also another group of researchers. They say technology is just an enabler. Like whatever tendencies people have, it enables that. So they did an experiment. They went to like Africa, gave people mobile phones and this and that technology. It seems good for like a couple of weeks, a month. After that, they go back to, drinking and then watching porn on it and wasting time playing games. So like, hey, this is not really working. Just a mundane analogy there, like that, just because having extra power, coming from Lord Krishna's advent here doesn't mean that their tendencies or their impressions are going to change. And that's why I was just thinking in a cool analogy there.
Interesting. Yeah, that seems to work. I like it. Is Vishuddha Sattva or Vishuddha Satna?
One more thing I wanted to share, that I remember also when Arjuna mentioned, when Arjuna is lamenting in the first canto, when Krishna is left, he tells Yudhishthira that, previously I had all this power and I was able to defeat, the Devas and win this war, that war. And he mentions that he was able to do all that because of, Krishna's presence, Krishna's strength. Yeah. So that's, you can say, as a supportive evidence where Arjuna is admitting that he was able to win all those wars because of Krishna's presence.
We'll see Jiva Goswami in the next verse, so we'll take it up on Monday. He quotes an even better verse in support of this idea that he's been giving to us from the churning of the milk ocean, where everyone had to be empowered by Vishnu in order to participate.
Yeah.
So he has found one nice shloka that really solidified the conception that he's giving to us. It's just amazing they didn't have like folio or any Google or anything, and they remember all these verses and give the explanation. So he gives one nice verse that will support this idea that he's been distributing to us. Okay, any other question anyone wants to ask or any last comment before we close out?
Joey had one question, yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if the term Vishuddha Sattva, is it Vishuddha Sattva, like Sattva Guna, but just Vishuddha?
Yes, correct.
Sattva.
Yes. Sattva. I always have questions, but could hold off. No, you have to go to the airport. Okay. Okay then. Well, we'll pause here for the day. I hope this subject matter is somewhat getting clear. It's slowly clearing up for me. It's been I've been wanting to engage with this section for a long time after reading Paramatma Sandarbha. So now I'm getting a chance. And I'll try to do one little seminar on that whole section of Paramatma Sandarbha so we can revisit these ideas and have them concretize. Okie dokie. Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo.